Subaru's Outback isn't an SUV, but offers most of what that class of vehicle provides in a package that's a little more rugged than your average jacked-up large 4x4 estate. After all, its permanent symmetrical all-wheel drive system will keep you going long after most other all-wheel drive estates, crossovers and compact SUVs have waved the white flag. Almost everything's different with this 6th generation model, but ultimately not much has really changed. Not even for this new era of electrification. But it's still the toughest, most capable 4x4 estate out there.
The Subaru Outback. With a history going all the way back to 1995, it was the original off-road-orientated family estate, with an image that, at the turn of the century, placed it comfortably alongside big Volvos and Land Rovers as a preferred choice for the tweed-jacketed country set. In more recent times, it's been a rarer sight on our roads, something Subaru's importers would like to change, with the introduction of this much improved 6th generation version. The Japanese brand reckons that this was the original crossover vehicle. Now, this may be true, but the way the market now understands crossovers, as Nissan Qashqai-like SUV-styled family hatches with little off-road ability, doesn't fit the Outback's remit at all. With a core market following in wild parts of Australia, America and Asia, it has to be pretty capable in the rough, or at least pretty capable for something that remains a conventional estate car. In this 6th generation guise launched here in mid-2021, it continues to be. Yes, the styling looks quite familiar, as does the 2.5-litre petrol automatic boxer powertrain, but in reality almost everything here is different from what went before. The car now sits on the brand's stiffer Subaru global platform, which it's claimed has improved ride and handling no end. Plus, there's a completely new level of cabin design. The car gets an improved version of the company's comprehensive EyeSight driver assist technology package, and over 90% of the Boxer engine's new, though surprisingly it doesn't feature any of the brand's latest hybrid tech. All of this will be needed for this car to appeal beyond our nation's rather small group of loyal Outback buyers. New era Subaru models like this must play a crucial role in the brand's climb back from a disastrous 2020, in which sales in this country nosedived by 68%. And slowly but surely things are beginning to look up for this enduring Fuji Heavy Industries owned brand. The Outback's always been the kind of car that made other 4x4 estates feel rather compromised and silly. If this one can match authenticity with a bit of extra polish, there might be a real niche for it in the market. Is that the case? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the Car and Driving Road Test, to find out. Paul Hogan of Crocodile Dundee fame was the face that originally launched this car back in the 90s, and sure enough it's easy to imagine his grizzled face behind the wheel of one of these pounding across the Australian outback, or at least amongst some of its bumpy but passable trails. We'll get to this 6th generation model's stiffer chassis and improved 2.5-litre Boxer engine in a moment, but it's possibly more important to note that there's now even more ground clearance, 213mm of it. Not enough to tackle anything too rocky, but certainly better than pretend off-roaders like Toyota's RAV4 or more similarly orientated 4x4 estate car rivals like Volvo's V60 Cross Country and Volkswagen's Golf All-Track. To be fair, cars like this Subaru aren't bought to tackle the Rubicon Trail, but to deal with muddy kart tracks and slippery back roads with or without heavy trailers in tow. All of which is well within this Outback's remit thanks to its symmetrical all-wheel drive system, which operates automatically. There are no buttons to press. This usually splits power 60-40 between front and rear axles, but it's also intelligent enough not to simply leave it at that, instead cleverly shunting power around to the wheel that can best use it in any given slushy situation. In short, an Outback is better off the tarmac than a car of this kind has any right to be. More on that in a minute. But none of that all-terrain prowess would be much good were this Subaru to be a poor companion on road, where of course it'll spend nearly all its time. Fortunately, the on-road driving dynamics of this car are much improved this time round. True, there are still rivals in this segment that handle more sharply, but this Subaru is at least now somewhere near the class standard in this regard. Most of the reasons why are down to the vast improvement in the chassis this car now sits on, the Subaru Global Platform already introduced in the smaller Forester SUV. This has allowed the Japanese maker to make significant changes to this suspension, and the result is that the Outback no longer lurches into corners, and body roll is now much better controlled, reduced by up to 50%, so Subaru claims. There's more traction through those turns too, especially in poor conditions, thanks to the active torque vectoring system that's now been engineered into the car's all-wheel drive setup. Subaru calls it SAWD. Not that you'll be wanting to test all of this out much. Unsurprising given its ride height, this Subaru feels a tad uncomfortable being driven in a sporty kind of fashion, even with the platform-related improvements we just mentioned. Start chucking this car about through the turns, and your passengers will quickly start to feel as green as the brochure's lifestyle propaganda. But you won't want to be doing this anyway, because there's not a massive amount of feedback through the steering. So more significant for likely owners will be the enhancements made in ride quality to this BT series model. Bumps and ruts are now superbly isolated, both in suburban traffic and at speed on the open road. Equally impressive is the improvement in refinement, helped by a reduction in vibrations from the steering system, the floor and the seats. Though that's sometimes spoiled a little by the engine and gearbox combination's tendency to pull higher revs than necessary when quick acceleration is called for, a common failing with belt-driven CVT auto transmissions like the Lineartronic setup used here. Exercise your right foot more than halfway towards the carpet with any sort of vigour, and the revs flare without much extra initial accompaniment in terms of additional forward motion. It all means that overtakes need to be planned well in advance, however clever you try to be in the way you use the 8 provided virtual ratios, these accessible via steering wheel mounted paddle shifters. That and the near 1.7 tonne curb weight explain why, in normal motoring, the car certainly doesn't feel as rapid as the official performance stats suggest. For reference, these see 62 miles an hour, supposedly achievable from rest in 10.2 seconds, en route to 120 miles an hour. To get anywhere near to replicating these readings, you'll need to engage the more dynamic of the 2 SI drive modes that Subaru provides for tarmac territory, activated by this steering wheel button. I, or intelligent, is the one you'll usually default to, but if you're running a bit late, there's an alternative S or Sport setting that tweaks throttle response, gear change timings, and steering feel that extra bit. We touched upon the engine at the beginning of this section, a 2.5 litre 4-cylinder unit, just as it was in final versions of the previous model, offering 169 PS, an unremarkable 252 newton metres of torque, and petrol-powered, of course, the brand long ago dumping diesel. Apparently, though, this is a very different power plant to the one fitted to that previous BS series Outback. There's a higher compression ratio, and over 90% of the parts are different. We'd expected that these changes would have included the adoption of the hybrid technology we've already seen in Subaru's Forester and XV models, but surprisingly, the brand has resisted the temptation to incorporate that here. So what you get beneath the bonnet is conventional Subaru. This Japanese maker has founded its reputation on the low centre of gravity offered by a horizontally opposed or boxer-style engine where the cylinders lay flat on their sides, the pistons travelling towards each other like the fists of two pugilists. It's a unique selling point that you notice every time you start up and immediately notice the gruffly soundtrack common to everything this manufacturer makes. Flat 4, by the way, means exactly that. The unique layout of the engine means that it's flatter and can be mounted lower down, improving four-wheel drive road holding and tarmac stability thanks to an ultra-low centre of gravity that just wouldn't be achievable with a conventional power plant. It's all part of Subaru's commitment to the different level of 4x4 technology that's delivered by the symmetrical all-wheel drive system, which, as we suggested earlier, is key to the Outback experience. Most so-called four-wheel drive rivals don't actually travel in four-wheel drive very much of the time, but instead use cheaper on-demand setups that add in extra rear-wheel traction only when it's absolutely necessary to do so, and, crucially, only after grip has been lost with the road surface. With Subaru's symmetrical four-wheel drive system, you have a simple, balanced, permanent distribution of power to all wheels at the same time, which can stop traction being lost in the first place, particularly when the car is on steep or tilting terrain. You can monitor the way it all works in a provided real-time display in the driving statistics section of the centre screen. Should you get carried away with all of this and end up with your Outback somewhere you really shouldn't have ventured to in the first place, you'll be interested to know that there's a 19.7 degree approach angle, a 22.6 degree departure angle, and a 21 degree ramp angle. All very SUV-like. As we mentioned earlier, no buttons or dials are needed to activate four-wheel drive on this car, but there is a control you can activate to further enhance its effectiveness. That for the X-Mode system we first saw on the previous generation version of this model. X-Mode works as would a conductor in charge of an orchestra, bringing together all the Outback's different engineering elements to work more harmoniously together for more confident navigation across slippery surfaces. In this case, that means coordination of symmetrical four-wheel drive with throttle response, transmission changes, and this Subaru's various braking and stability-orientated electronic systems, which include hill descent control for easing you down steep and slippery slopes. Previously, all of this was incorporated into a single setting, but with this BS series 6th generation Outback, you now get two screen selectable options: deep snow or mud for off-road surfaces where the tyres can become buried, such as deep snow or dry dirt, and snow/dirt for use on slippery road surfaces like snow or gravel. The ability to better deal with slippery tarmac will of course be a greater buying incentive for likely Outback buyers. After all, you won't want to be attacking the Serengeti in this car, but a rural owner might well need to deal with towing challenges, so this Subaru has a 2,000 kilogram braked or 750 kilogram unbraked towing capacity. They may well also come across deep snow or winter floods, in which case the enhanced 213mm ground clearance figure we mentioned earlier will enable this car to wade through much deeper water than its rivals. The Lineartronic CVT Auto gearbox is also engineered to help across testing terrain, designed to preserve the kind of momentum that's often lost during gear changes with either a manual box or with traditional automatic transmission. Having said all of this, we don't want you to get us wrong. This is no rock crawler. For a start, there's no low-range gearbox for that kind of thing, but for simply dealing with field tracks, towing, or getting somewhere icy or muddy, this Subaru will suit many owners perfectly. One of the things that's characterised Outback development over the last few generations is the way this car has progressively got a little larger. Back in the 90s, it was merely a dressed-up, ruggedised version of Subaru's Mondeo-sized legacy estate. But in more recent times, it's needed to be a little bigger than that. After all, buyers need an incentive to stretch to this car over the brand's already reasonably spacious Forester estate model. And in any case, the company's dealers want this Outback to be able to compete on equal terms with slightly larger rivals, like Volvo's V90 Cross Country. So, sure enough, this 6th generation version is slightly longer and wider, and every exterior panel has been changed. It's enough to give this car a bit more roadway presence, though unless you knew your Subarus, you might still at first glance be inclined to dismiss it as an updated Mark V model rather than an all-new 6th generation design. Look a little closer though, and the differences become more obvious. Up front, there's a more upmarket look, courtesy of a redesigned front end featuring a grille now with two rather than 3 louvers, this appendage flanked by narrower, meaner-looking LED headlights. Further down, the fog lamps gain angular frames and flank a more overt skid plate. It's in profile, though, that this Outback's chosen role as a properly off-road-orientated estate becomes most obvious. From side on, previous generation models looked much like any other medium-range station wagon with a token set of roof rails. But no longer. This Mark VI car gets a higher 213mm ground clearance, that's 13 more than before, plus strangely shaped wheel arch cladding, which continues in weirdly angular fashion along the lower sills. And these roof rails look really ready for the Outback. On this field variant, where they gain these unusual lime green inserts, they've been strengthened and feature tie holes so that straps or ropes can be more easily tied on. Whichever trim variant you choose, you'll get wheels of 18 inches in size, but the colour will designate the spec. Dark grey for base limited spec, dark metallic for this field spec model, and lighter machined dark metallic for the top touring version. At the rear, the same much more overt SUV-style approach continues. So the lower body cladding with its integrated corner reflectors is chunkier, the lower skid plate is more noticeable, the smarter set of darkened LED tail lights becomes more angular, and the tailgate windows wrapped by a subtle black roof spoiler with a shark fin antenna just above. As usual, what's important is what you can't see, the Subaru global platform that now underpins this model, substantially strengthened with a new structural frame and additional beams and subframes, all of which, according to Subaru, has improved protection in frontal, side and rear end collisions by 40%. It's inside, though, that the biggest improvements have been made, so let's take a look up front. To properly compete with prestige rivals, a far more upmarket cabin was necessary, and though later versions of the old Mark V model offered a step forward in this respect, they still looked a little plasticky alongside the best of the competition, hence the effort put into this 6th generation version. You probably still wouldn't think you were in a BMW, an Audi or even a Volkswagen, but there's no doubt that considerable steps forward have been made in perceived interior quality. Green and grey double stitching now sweeps across the doors and the multi-layered dash, where a piano black inlay reflects the trimming around the smart gear lever. The pedals are silver, the seats are various kinds of leather, and the stitched 3-spoke wheel with its neat thumb rests feels like a quality item. More importantly, you sit a little higher than you would in obvious rivals. The positioning isn't quite SUV-like, but it suits the kind of car the Outback is trying to be. It feels quite a bit roomier up front here this time round too, mainly because the windscreen has been moved forward and the front door side windows moved out, creating what Subaru claims is a class-leading level of spaciousness. Continuing with the Mark VI model changes, arguably the most significant one lies with this redesigned and much larger 11.6-inch Starlink centre screen, which is pretty easy to get to grips with. The operation surface split into 3 parts. The main part of the monitor gives you the usual radio, media, phone and app options, plus maps too, if you've avoided entry-level trim and got a navigation system included. Using these icons via touch, swipe or drag motions, you can bring up maps, find contacts, send messages, select driving modes and access compatible apps, news, music and podcasts. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone connectivity is included, as is voice recognition and a 6-speaker DAB audio system. You'll also want to investigate a car info section, linking you into a very informative display showing real-time 4-wheel drive activation plus an inclinometer. Everything else you'll need is either at the very top or the very bottom of the display. At the highest part of the monitor, just below temperature and time, you get a dedicated section that replicates the old separate top-of-the-dash display that Subarus used to have. According to the way you swipe left or right, this can show audio functions, X-mode, tractional settings, or key data fields for acceleration, consumption and angle. At the very bottom of the monitor, just above climate system readouts, activated by proper physical switches, are shortcut virtual buttons. The car designated one on the left connects you into vehicle control and driving assistance menus, while the option on the right connects you into the car's driver monitoring system. This is integrated with a facial recognition camera identifying up to 5 individuals in the driver's seat and automatically adjusting settings for seat position, door mirror angles and air conditioning preferences. So the dash has gone fully digital. It's curious in this day and age, though, to discover that the instrument binnacle hasn't. The Outback, one of the very few modern-era larger models of any kind, persisting with old-fashioned analogue dials. Even the little screen between them feels like something you'd have seen in a previous model, overcrowded with fuel, range, driver assist, speed, gear and odometer readouts. Somehow, though, traditional though this binnacle layout might be, it feels eminently suited to the kind of car this still is. At least the drive ergonomics are as good as ever. You're perfectly positioned in front of the reach and rake adjustable leather-trimmed multifunction steering wheel, and the fatigue-reducing seats offer comfortable support for longer journeys with heating you can tailor to an impressively intricate degree via the centre screen. Some of the plastics lower down the dash are hard and scratchy, but build quality seems fine. We should also mention the way that the large expanse of glass around the interior offers excellent all-round visibility, aided by thin front pillars, big door mirrors, a huge rear window and lots of rear three-quarter glass to alleviate blind spots. Provision for cabin storage space is a bit of a mixed bag. The door bins are surprisingly small and most of the glove box room is taken up by the handbook. Still, you get a decent-sized box between the seats with an integrated tray and an area at the base of the centre stack with an aux-in socket and 2 USB-A slots. You're provided with a little narrow storage slot in the front passenger footwell and another ledge nearly as useless in front of their knees. Subaru hasn't forgotten an overhead compartment for your sunglasses, though, and there's a strap over the driver's sun visor for parking tickets. Time to take a seat in the rear. Now, as at the front, the side sill steps here at the rear have been widened for better footing and changed to a non-slip pattern. Once inside, the fractional extra cabin width, the low glass line, the expansive rear quarter windows, and the fact that the centre transmission tunnel has been kept quite low, all together combine to give this part of the cabin a sense of relative spaciousness it wouldn't otherwise have. Even if you don't have the power tilting sunroof, whose availability is limited to top-spec touring trim. There's reasonable space for head, knees and legs, but you wouldn't really want to be the occupant confined to this raised central part of the cushion base. Heated rear seats are standard across the range, and the backrest reclines for greater comfort on longer journeys. Unfortunately, though, the headrests back here are of the sort that uncomfortably dig into the back of your neck until raised. Subaru provides twin USB-A ports next to the twin vents, and nicely finished cup holders with little integrated stays to keep your drinks receptacle in place are secreted within the central armrest. Reading lights have been forgotten, but you get seat back pockets, small door bins and a coat hook in the overhead grab handles. OK, we'll finish with a look at luggage space. Now, Subaru has at last added a hands-free function to the powered tailgate you get above entry-level trim. You simply wave your elbow near this Subaru badge, and once it's raised, there's a single-touch pop-up tonneau which allows easy access to the boot area, which, it turns out, is 561 litres in size, about the same as what the previous generation model could offer. To give you some segment perspective, the capacity provided here is 32 litres more than you'd get from Volvo's much pricier V60 cross-country, but 50 litres less than the other possible segment rival for this Subaru, Volkswagen's Golf Alltrack. A compartment beneath the boot floor offers a little more room, though not enough to house a spare wheel. Subaru has added a netted area on the right and improved the hooks back here. You get one on each cargo side, as well as the usual 4 on the cargo floor. Plus there are bag hooks either side and a 12-volt socket on the right. Because, as mentioned earlier, the rear backrest reclines, it's possible to put it in a more upright position if you need to cram a lot of bulky items in back here, say suitcases on an airport run. Unfortunately, there's no ski hatch or 40-20-40 split rear bench, so longer items will have to go on the roof if you've a couple of rear-seated passengers. Retracting the seat backs is easy thanks to these sidewall catches, and doing so releases up to 2,143 litres of total capacity. Outback pricing started from around £34,000 at the time of this test in spring 2022, a sum which got you the entry-level limited version of this car. Those with broader budgets might like to stretch upwards either to £38,000 for the mid-level field spec model we're trying here, or even to around £39,500, the sum required for top spec touring trim. All come only with the brand's 2.5-litre Boxer petrol engine, mated to Lineartronic automatic transmission and the company's legendary symmetrical AWD system. To give you some Subaru perspective on the pricing we just mentioned, the brand's slightly smaller Forester E-Boxer mid-sized SUV was, at the time of this test, priced from just over £36,000. And the company's considerably smaller XV E-Boxer SUV was priced from just under £32,000. This Outback offers considerably more boot space and interior room than either of those two showroom stablemates, doesn't cost much more to run and drives much better on tarmac too. So who needs an SUV? Answers on a postcard, please. It might be more pertinent right at present, though, to ask the question, who needs an off-road orientated estate? Because nearly all of the cars that used to represent this Outback model's direct competition have been withdrawn from the market in the last couple of years. When we tested the previous generation model, we were directing you to also consider cars like Volkswagen's Passat Alltrack, Peugeot's 508 RXH, Skoda's Octavia Scout, and Audi's A4 Allroad. All have disappeared from the market, along with larger off-road orientated estates like Audi's A6 Allroad and the Mercedes E-Class All-Terrain. In fact, only two direct competitors remain. One is the Volkswagen Golf Alltrack, which cost in the same ballpark, around £37,000, but is a slightly smaller car and only comes with a diesel engine. The other is Volvo's V60 Cross Country. This can be had with a comparable petrol engine, but it's much more expensive, with prices starting from around £46,000. In truth, though, neither of those two cars are likely to be on a more typical Outback customer's radar because neither of them could get anywhere near this Subaru's prowess off-road. In truth, nor could most SUVs at this price point, and though you'd probably be better off in one of those on a gnarly trail, few can offer the kind of raised ride height you get with this Outback, or a properly capable mechanical four-wheel drive system. The longer you look at this car, then, the more unique at its price point you might think it becomes. If that's your perspective, then you're going to want to know just how generous Subaru has been with the standard spec. So let's take a look at that now. Starting with the base limited model, that comes with LED headlights featuring automatic activation, an auto levelizer, adaptive driving beams, pop-up washers, and a steering response system. The tail lights have LED illuminations too, and in addition you get dark grey 18-inch alloy wheels, rear privacy glass, power folding heated mirrors, roof rails with built-in crossbars, wheel arch extensions, auto wipers, keyless entry, a Thatcham Category 1 alarm, and a very complete suite of Subaru's EyeSight camera safety features, which we'll get onto in a moment. There's no spare wheel, though. We don't think a tyre mobility kit has any place on a car with this one's tough remit. Driving features fitted across the range include the SI Drive, Subaru Intelligent Drive Mode system, and the brand's X Mode, set up for off-roading, which includes hill descent control. Inside, you get dual-zone automatic air conditioning with an anti-dust filter, 8-way powered front seats, heated rear seats, and windscreen wiper de-icer elements. Infotainment is taken care of by an 11.6-inch tablet-like central screen featuring voice recognition, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, smartphone connectivity, and a 6-speaker DAB audio system. Want more? Then £4,000 extra gets you the mid-range field spec model that we're trying here. Recognisable by its dark metallic, finished 18-inch wheels, its black colour pack, which adds certain elements of exterior black finishing, and its strengthened built-in black ladder roof rails, which feature enhanced tie-down holes so that straps and ropes can be more easily fastened on. Interior embellishments in field spec trim include water-repellent grey and black synthetic leather, satellite navigation, aluminium pedals and a powered tailgate. If you want everything that Subaru has to offer on your Outback, then you'll be directed to the top touring spec model, identifiable by its machined dark metallic 18-inch wheels. And here at the top of the range, you also get Napa leather upholstery, a power sliding and tilt adjustable sunroof, and an 11-speaker Harman Kardon audio system with a subwoofer and amplifier. What about options? Well, bear in mind, before you allocate too much of your budget for extras, that you're almost certainly going to have to pay your Subaru dealer more for your choice of paint colour. The only standard shade is crystal white pearl. Otherwise, there are 6 further choices, including the autumn green metallic finish we've got here. If you've budget left over once you've paid for paint, you can add a vertically slatted front grille, and for the inside, you can add side sill plates in stainless steel, premium carpet mats and illumination for the footwell and the inside of the tailgate. What about protective and practical extras? Well, there are door visors and foils to protect the bonnet, the door handles, the mirrors and the roof. You can also add side protectors, side resin underguards and splash guards behind the wheels too. If you're going to be regularly taking the car off-road, you'll want to invest in the tough steel underguards provided for the engine and rear differential. Add in roof bars and you'll be able to specify attachments for skis, kayaks, roof boxes and bicycles. Most Outback customers will want to specify the tow bar we have here, and if you do so, you'll also be able to specify rear bicycle holders for either 2 or 3 bikes. We'd want to add the optional spare wheel too. For the cabin, you can add a coat hanger, an ashtray and rubber mats, along with a rear entry protection foil. For the boot, there are protective cargo step panels and cargo trays of either the deep or the low variety. You can add an anti-slip mat, a luggage divider, a cargo net and a cargo management box. Plus there's a boot flap that extends across the bumper to protect against scratches when loading, and a rear seat back protector might be useful if you regularly carry pets, as might the hammock-like dirt bags that extend across the rear seats. On to safety, an area where big strides have been made with this 6th generation design, which includes the 4th generation version of Subaru's impressively complete package of EyeSight driver assist technology, all of which comes fitted as standard across the range. The brand has now produced well over 1 million EyeSight-equipped vehicles, and a recent study by the Institute for Traffic Accident Research and Data Analysis in Japan found that Subaru models fitted with EyeSight were 61% less likely to have an accident than those without it. Look in detail at how the system works, and it quickly becomes clear why that is. The setup uses 2 stereo cameras, one mounted either side of the rear view mirror, to monitor the road for up to 110 metres ahead as you drive. These are then used to capture 3-dimensional colour images that are nearly as sharp as those seen by the human eye, hence the system's name. That extra accuracy makes quite a difference. Other similar camera-driven safety systems can only recognise upcoming hazards as vague, unidentified obstacles. In contrast, the EyeSight cameras can specifically recognise vehicles, motorbikes, bicycles, pedestrians and lane markings. As the car moves closer to the potential hazard, the EyeSight setup takes an image from each camera and compares those images to determine your closing distance to the object. Software decisions can then be made in the blink of an eye to either warn you to take avoiding action or autonomously apply braking, so that an accident can either be completely avoided or its severity significantly reduced. That's basically how the EyeSight autonomous braking setup works. Subaru calls it pre-collision braking. Now, Should that system not be enough, there's an incorporated autonomous emergency steering feature that uses the stereo camera and rear radar to detect lane markings and judge whether there's enough space to safely avoid a collision with an object ahead. If there is, the car will help you avoid the collision with automatic steering support. 7 other systems are also provided as standard on this Outback using the EyeSight technology, and we'll run you through them. At highway cruising speeds, adaptive cruise control automatically regulates your distance to the vehicle in front. Emergency lane keep assist will apply gentle steering correction if at over 40 miles an hour you're about to deviate over road lane markings. Lane sway and departure warning will vibrate the steering wheel to warn you if the car gets caught by a gust of wind or departs its lane without indicating. Lead vehicle start alert will prompt you if you're stopped in a traffic queue and haven't noticed that the vehicle in front has started to move. And pre-collision throttle management will warn you if you select drive instead of reverse when the car is facing an obstacle, say if it's parked facing a wall, for instance, and it'll cut the engine to prevent an impact. There's also traffic sign recognition, which drives an intelligent speed limiter which can automatically adapt your speed to prevailing limits. And there's more. All Outback variants also get Subaru's rear vehicle detection system package, which includes 3 more key features. Blind spot monitoring works if you're on the move and you're about to pull out in front of another vehicle. Lane change assist works on the highway to warn if another vehicle is approaching the rear of the car in a neighbouring lane. And rear cross traffic alert warns you of approaching traffic when you're reversing out of a parking space. It's all very reassuring. With this 6th generation Forester, Subaru has refined its driver monitoring system, one of those setups that periodically checks your reactions for drowsiness. Competitor products have had this sort of feature for ages, but the Japanese maker has taken the opportunity here to further develop it with more advanced facial recognition technology. If, when on the move and at the wheel, you look out of the window or across at a passenger for too long of a period of time, the system will recognise that your face direction is not forward and a warning will sound, alerting you to focus on the road ahead. Like other such systems, this one will also search for signs of drowsiness based on your reactions and how frequently you're blinking or closing your eyes. If something's detected, it'll mute the audio system to make sure that you can't ignore the warnings it'll give you. We should also make the point that this 6th generation BT series Outback is also a fundamentally stronger and safer car than it was before, thanks to its new Subaru Global platform. Body strength has been increased by 40%, allowing the car's special ring-shaped reinforcement frame to absorb more energy in the event of a collision and disperse it more widely beneath the seating compartment. The body has been substantially strengthened with a new structural frame and additional beams and subframes, further enhancing top-level collision safety performance, which allowed this car to achieve superb results in the industry's exacting MPDB, or Mobile Progressive Deformable Barrier, crash test. In addition, as mentioned earlier, all Outback variants now get steering responsive LED headlights that turn with the bends and dip themselves at night in the face of oncoming traffic. The result of all of this has been a string of safety awards for this car around the world, and as expected, it's gained a full 5-star rating by independent assessors Euro NCAP. Plus, of course, the previous model's full suite of more traditional safety features has been carried over. A little disappointingly, though, European spec models don't get the pedestrian protection airbag that's standard on some Subarus sold in Japan. But you do, of course, get the usual front, side and curtain airbags, plus a front passenger seat cushion airbag and driver's knee airbag. A safety pedal setup prevents foot injuries in accidents, and there are also anti-whiplash head restraints and ISOFIX child seat fastenings. Hill start assist is included to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and there's a tyre pressure monitoring system. Of course, the important thing is to try and make sure that you don't end up in an accident situation in the first place. And to that end, this car provides a whole range of electronic features that work with the symmetrical all-wheel drive system and are overseen by the latest version of Subaru's clever VDC, or Vehicle Dynamics Control setup. Included in this package is ATV, or Active Torque Vectoring, for sharper corner turning, while carryover features from the previous model include things like stability and traction control, plus a 4-sensor, 4-channel ABS setup with emergency brake assist functionality, so effective that Subaru can claim near identical stopping performance on both wet and dry surfaces. In short, it all adds up to a very complete safety showing that most rivals in this class can't get close to matching. Usually, a more capable car is a more expensive one to run. You'd certainly expect that the permanent symmetrical four-wheel drive system of this Outback would exact more of a fuel and emissions penalty than would be found on most other rivals. Cars that trundle around in two-wheel drive most of the time, with all-wheel traction only being introduced when needed. Sure enough, previous generation Outback models really struggled against competitors that made up for their lack of off-piste ability, with a more compelling set of running cost returns. This time round, though, the brand has tried a bit harder to get the efficiency of this car right up to class standards. You get a feel for that right up front with the news that nearly all the engine components used in this car's 2.5-litre, 169 PS flat 4 boxer petrol engine have been either modified or completely redesigned, primarily to reduce weight. But then, if you're a potential owner and really like the thought of choosing this car, your hopes might be dashed again with the news that Subaru hasn't bothered, as part of this redesign, to include any of the e-Boxer hybrid technology lately built into its smaller XV and Forester SUVs. Which means that despite all the engineering efforts made here, the efficiency readings look distinctly unremarkable by class standards. WLTP rated at 33 mpg on the combined cycle and 193 grams per kilometre of CO2. To give you some perspective on that, this model's most direct rival, Volvo's V60 Cross Country, which has a much more powerful 250 PS mild hybrid petrol engine, manages up to 38.1 mpg and up to 168 grams per kilometre of CO2. Still, you may well take the view that this 6th generation Outback now gets close enough to be class standard for its extra off-road capability to compensate for these efficiency shortcomings. And further compensation may come with higher residual values than you get with rivals. The previous generation model achieved up to 79% of its original value after 3 years and 36,000 miles. This time round, Subaru conservatively predicts around 70% retained value over the same duration. That's still very impressive. Not so impressive are the insurance groupings: 27E for the base limited model, 29A for this mid-range field version, and 30A for top touring spec. Servicing intervals are every 12,000 miles or every year, whichever comes first. There's also a maintenance menu in the car info part of the centre screen, which enables you to monitor engine oil, oil filter use, tyres and your overall maintenance schedule, noting when the last service was and when the next one is due. As for the warranty, well, there's the peace of mind of a 5-year or 100,000 mile package that embarrasses the 3-year 60,000 mile package that most rivals offer. You also get a 3-year recovery and roadside assistance programme you'll almost certainly never need. If you really don't want an SUV but really need one, there are various plush, jacked-up four-wheel drive estate cars that can claim to offer a realistic alternative, yet few of them would last long if regularly used uphill, down dale, on the average rutted farm track. Here's an exception. This 6th generation Outback may not be able to replace a fully fledged off-roader for those living halfway up a mountain peak, but for a vehicle of this kind, it really is extraordinarily capable. Previous versions of this model were just as good, but weren't really large or plush enough. to compete against the premium brand off-road style estates that represent this car's most natural competition. That's now changed. This 6th generation Outback has a lot less competition than its predecessor models did in this niche segment, but even so, we're surprised that it doesn't feature the company's latest Boxer e-hybrid tech. Still, we doubt whether this will bother likely customers very much. People who don't want an SUV but are looking for the toughest, most durable 4x4 estate out there. This is it. The improvements made in drive dynamics here are welcome, but it's unlikely that many owners will really notice them. You don't choose an Outback for the pleasure of throwing it from lock to lock at speed. You choose it because it can be a luxury estate 1 minute, then a go-anywhere family conveyance to your mountainside weekend cottage the next. This Subaru now rides better, feels plusher and is slightly more efficient than it was before. But we could still direct you to other similarly sized, smartly turned out four-wheel drive estates that would do those things better. On a rutted track, though, they'd feel rather silly next to an Outback, and that's the biggest compliment we can probably pay it.